All right, guys. So a little bit earlier this week, I talked about Judge in 2019 and some issues that I thought led to his inability to pull the ball here in 2019. And I just wanted to go more in depth with you guys in terms of what I'm seeing and what I think could actually cause this, and what I think he could do, or even if you're experiencing the same problem, what you could potentially do to be able to pull the ball better. I just want to make sure that this is not at all a crack on Judge. This is simply looking at the numbers that he's producing, looking at his actual physical swing. Right, nothing about him as a player, just kind of taking out and looking at his swing and then making some adjustments or some inferences based on that. So what we can see right here, right off the bat, is we have an Aaron Judge versus Mike Trout spray chart in 2019. So we'll notice that the home runs are in black for both, ground balls are in green, and then the fly balls are in blue. So what we'll notice, and again, this is kind of a small sample size for Judge. He was out for part of the year with, I believe, an oblique injury. But he's still played in a decent number of games to be able to have this many results. So I think it's worth looking into. But we can see that his home runs here are in black, fly balls in blue, ground balls in green. So what we'll notice is the majority of Judge's balls that are in the air are all to the right side. If we were to draw kind of an imaginary line here down the middle, we can see that there's two home runs that are just barely to the left. So really these are pretty much center field, and then two fly balls that might be in left center field here. But outside of that, everything that it hits in the air is to the right side. And again, I'm not saying that is necessarily good or bad for Judge, but these are the results that his swing is producing. On the opposite side of the spectrum here, we have Trout. So we can see that his fly balls are dispersed pretty well. He has more pop outs here on the right side, but that's to be expected with most righties. And then the majority of his home runs are to the left side here. So again, this is just separating these players, their actual, personal capabilities from their swings, and looking at what their swing is producing. So before we get into their actual swings, I wanted to pull up this graph here. So this is from 2013, and just looking at slugging percentage per event, and we have pulled third of the field, middle third of the field, and I use this just because it's good visual representation. I don't have any sort of kind of thoughts about 2013. This was just a good way to represent it visually. But we have pull side, middle, and then oppo, and we're looking at slugging percentage per event. So OFFB is basically outfield fly balls, so balls hit in the air to pull side, middle, oppo, then we have line drive, then we have ground ball, and what's the slugging percentage on each of these events. So we can see that the pull third side of the field gives us significantly higher slugging percentage in both fly balls and line drives when compared to middle and oppo. So for the majority of hitters, it's going to be very beneficial for them to use the pull side of the field. And this is why I've been talking a lot about what I'm seeing with Judge, is because, again, for those who don't play in Yankees Park, or for those who aren't Aaron Judge, it seems like pulling the ball is going to be good for them, at least the majority of the time, or at least over half of the time, compared to going middle or going oppo in order to produce better results. So that's why I think this is a very important topic to cover, because that's something that, as we saw, Judge seems to be struggling with this year. Even though his production is still very good, it's still top notch. He is not pulling the ball really very well, which this chart shows here. So getting into the actual swing. So this is a clip that I put out on Twitter of Judge, and this is a ball up and in that he hits a double on. So this was one of the rare times in which he pulls the ball and hits it in the air. But for Judge, this ball should, in my opinion, definitely leave the park. Instead, he kind of top spins it out to left, dies before it should, and he ends up with a double. So I'll just let this clip play. At the end, we're going to see right here compared with Trout, and we'll see a couple slow motion here. All right, so what we're going to pay attention to is the front shoulder. And if you think about any type of rotational sequence, there needs to be a series or a sequence of deceleration that leads to the next link in the chain accelerating. So we're going to pay attention specifically to Judge's front shoulder and how that relates to Trout and then some other hitters a little bit later in the video. But if I put my cursor here on his front shoulder and go back and forth, we can see that it is rotating all the way through contact and all the way after contact. There's no deceleration. It just continues to go relatively down and back, right? There's no stoppage of movement in that front shoulder. If we now compare that to, let's say, someone like Trout, we can see that right there, right from, it's going to be better if I control it with my mouse, but from roughly here through there, we can see that there's no continued rotation from that front shoulder, right? If I go back and put my mouse over his shoulder here, it stops. So what that's doing is the deceleration here is allowing the barrel to then continue, the barrel and the arms to continue going forward without having to take that torso along with it. So, energy is created from the ground up, right? But if the previous segment in the chain doesn't stop, like we see with Judge, right, his shoulders just continue rotating and kind of spinning around. If that doesn't stop, he's not going to be able to get this barrel out in front as well as he otherwise might be able to do. Instead, he just continues rotating, continues pulling and spinning, and that's going to create not an optimal result. Like, again, we'll compare it with the Trout clip where there's that definite point where the upper half stops and the arms and barrel can continue forward and really whip out in front. All right, so that's the big mechanical thing that we're looking at. Even in this clip here, this was a ball, I'll play it from the start. Another pitch that was up and in, and he gets jammed, goes to the right side. I think it was a fly out, got caught in right field. But with it, we see the same thing, right? He continues spinning, and his barrel is never allowed to really actually get out in front of the body like it needs to be in order to hit this pitch successfully. Instead, it just continues rotating and spinning with the shoulders, which isn't going to produce that optimal result. So hopefully you guys can see the difference there, and we'll look at a couple clips a little bit later here. But before we get into that, throwing is another rotational movement where it's fairly accepted that, again, there's a sequence of events. So it's the lower half through the midsection and then into the shoulders, into the upper arm, the lower arm, wrist, hand, baseball, right? In throwing, in order for this whip here, this front side has to decelerate and stop for this to then whip out in front. And we see this with Chapman, right? This side has stopped, it's decelerated, which allows this portion here to accelerate. Right there. So what Judge, if we were to turn Judge into a thrower here, what we would see is this front side here continues spinning and rotating around. So the fact that that doesn't decelerate means that he has nothing to then work against to finish that last part of the chain. So if you were to imagine Chapman's glove just continue rotating to the left, that's going to throw off his whole sequence, right? He's not going to get that final whip here at the end like he currently does. So that's a huge part in any sort of movement where we want to end with a whip, right? Throwing ends with a whip of the arm, with a whip of the baseball. Hitting ends with a whip of the bat, with a whip of the barrel. In order for that sequence to happen, we need deceleration of the previous components in order to create optimal speed and optimal function in that final whip. So this throw here is just another way to demonstrate that in another different type of rotational movement. All right, so getting into some other hitters, we'll first look at their swing, and then we'll take a quick look at their spray chart for each of these guys for the 2019 season. And the first one that we have here is Rendon, one of my favorite guys to watch. But what we're going to see with Rendon, we're going to focus on just that front shoulder for all of these guys. So if I put my mouse here, we're going to see from this point on that decelerates, or it's completely stopped, right? It's very, very still, and then it's allowing the barrel to get out in front. And this pitch isn't up, but it's still in. It's down and in. So we can see that the deceleration, the stoppage of that lead arm, of that shoulder, is allowing the barrel to continue whipping out in front to get to that pitch optimally. And if we go ahead and pull up Rendon's spray chart from, again, 2019, we can see that he has a similar kind of spray chart as Trout's, where his fly balls are pretty well dispersed, but the majority of his home runs are here to the left, and he is definitely not having a problem pulling the ball in the air. So that's Rendon. Here's Gary Sanchez. I'll let this play in full to start. Okay, now if we go ahead and slow it down, again, right through here, if I put my mouse on his shoulder, you can see that it's decelerated, right? And that allows the barrel to whip out in front. And yes, this pitch is away, but this is one that I happen to have. If he does it on when it's away, he's going to do it when it's in, right? So that deceleration, that stoppage of the shoulder, allows the barrel to whip out in front. Go ahead and pull up his spray chart. Again, we see a similar thing. More home runs to this pull side. He is not having a problem pulling the ball in the air as Judge is this year. And then the last clip that we'll take a look at in terms of actual players, here's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Guerrero uses the whole field very, very well, but we're still going to see him. One, we know that he doesn't, even though he uses the whole field very well, he doesn't struggle with pulling the ball. So our goal shouldn't be to create a hitter that's good at going oppo, but not good at pulling. It should be to create a hitter that is, number one, good at pulling the baseballs, because we saw the advantages in terms of slugging percentage, and then following that, number two, be able to use the whole field, but not at the sacrifice of being able to pull the ball. So Guerrero's a good example of a guy who can do all of that pretty well. But again, with him, we're going to see, if I put my mouse on his shoulder, that's decelerated. It doesn't continue rotating or spinning as we saw with Judge. So that allows the barrel to work out and get out in front. And his spray chart, again, we see it quite a bit in center field here, but we know that he doesn't struggle to pull the baseball. If you watch any of the home run derby, and as he gets kind of a bigger sample size, we're going to see that spread be pretty consistent for Guerrero. Okay, so we know that decelerating the front side, decelerating that front shoulder is going to be important to be able to get the barrel out in front, whip the barrel out in front, and hit that inside pitch well with power, which we know from the slugging percentages that that's an important piece of being a good hitter. So these are two drills that we'll use or that you can use if you notice that this is a problem that you have in order to address the deceleration of that front side. So the goal here in this drill is to get the, let me turn the volume down here, get the sledgehammer up to speed as quickly as possible, and then decelerate it right before it hits some object. So in this video, I happen to use a fizzy ball. This could really be anything. It's just what we're training here is accelerating an object rotationally, but then decelerating it right before it hits an object here. So the shoulders are going to have to stop in order to get the arms to stop, because if we kind of slow this down here, right, the shoulders have to stop here to get the hands to, well, when the shoulder stops, when the shoulders decelerate, the hands are going to continue forward before they then stop. So we're training the ability to use the shoulders deceleration to then whip the hands out and then stop the hands, similar to something as in what we'd see in a swing. So this is a blend that you can use with your swing. So you take the bat out of your hands, learn to decelerate, and then take that into your swing. So that's one. And then the second one would be this one here. So this is basically, this is the same concept, but we're using a bat and we're hitting a fizzy ball. I'll go ahead and let this video play.
Given a baseline level of bat speed, we also want to be able to accelerate our barrel as quickly as we can to get it from your starting position to where you're going to get at contact. And one of the ways that we can do that is by hitting a larger and also squishy ball, because that's going to give us an external stimulus where your body knows it has to get up to speed as quickly as possible, and just punch the object. You can think about a boxer throwing a punch, right? He's going to jab and then recoil and pull back right away. That's the same thing that this is going to do for us. So it's going to train our ability to launch the swing faster versus just having pure bat speed that kind of develops slowly. So what you're going to do, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can set it on a bucket, right, and hit it like it's off a tee. You can have a partner throw it. That's actually one that I prefer. But if you're by yourself and you don't want to do a tee, I actually prefer this over a tee. You can literally just throw it out, bounce it, and then hit it off the bounce. So that'll look something like this. And again, you're just going to stick it. Right, you're just trying to stick that contact position so that your body knows it has to create speed quickly. Get there, stick it, and it's going to help you feel where you're at contact. You can also use the flight of the ball as feedback in terms of how your barrel path was on each swing.
Okay, so during that drill, if we give ourselves the goal of decelerating or just punching the ball, right? We can see here that I know that the fizzy ball here is kind of in the way, but if we look at my front shoulder here, you see that it's going to stop so that the hands can continue forward. So we're giving the body the goal of just punching, of quickly punching this ball. So what that's going to do is, as we saw in the sledgehammer swing, the shoulders are going to decelerate because it knows that the hands need to explosively punch the ball. So in order for the end of that kinetic sequence to happen, these need to decelerate for this to be able to get there, right? So that's the whole goal of this drill, is what it's going to teach you to do is use proper deceleration of the body in order to optimally whip the bat out in front.